So if we can move on a little bit to political philosophy, as I understand it, you coined the term Geolibertarianism. Is that accurate?
That's right. I combined Georgism, which is the philosophy of Henry George, who advocated only taxing land and not taxing anything else, with libertarianism that favored, free markets and free societies. And geo stands for like land as in geography, so it's a kind of a double meaning.
Could you perhaps go into the libertarian political spectrum a little bit? Where does geolibertarianism fit in between anarcho-capitalism, mutualism? You mentioned Georgism. Where does it really fit in compared to these other ideologies?
Yeah, it's kind of orthogonal, or it's like perpendicular to these. You can have an anarchist geolibertarian society, or you could have a minarchist, a small government geolibertarian society. In both cases, the public goods, there would be public goods, because even in anarchism, people want streets and parks and security and fire protection and so on. So in either case, the public goods would be financed by land rent. In the anarchist version, it would be contractual communities, such as already exists in homeowners associations, condominiums, land trusts, and so on. Or it could be, if there's a government, a limited government, it would be financed by from a land value or land rent. And that's been a debate among libertarians who are minarchists, or who, even if they're anarchists, for political campaigns, there's always a debate of what is the most libertarian source of public finance. And the geolibertarians say it's land rent, because it does not burden the economy, it removes the implicit subsidy to land value, and it does not interfere with production or consumption.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'd really like to just move across the libertarian spectrum, maybe just to kind of get your thoughts on a few different ideologies. So, I've had some economists in the past on the show, such as Walter Block, who's an anarcho-capitalist. So is there any problem with that anarcho-capitalist voluntarist approach that you think is solved by a geolibertarianism?
Well, many anarcho-capitalists envision an atomistic society of individuals and families contracting with insurance companies, individually contracting with protective associations, and who somehow provide a peaceful society. And the geolibertarian vision is different. I don't see like families contracting with some insurance company that will also provide protection externally. What I see is more like today's homeowners associations, where people form a contractual community with an explicit contract that everybody signs on to, and that community then provides the local public goods like the streets and the highways and security and fire protection, and these then associate together for a larger association for things like freeways and mosquito control and things that require a larger area. So that's kind of the geolibertarian vision. So it's not now if people, if there were an anarchist society, an anarcho-capitalist society, and they wanted to form these insurance companies and subscribe to protection agencies, there's no problem there as far as geolibertarians are concerned. But we just think it's more realistic and more feasible to have geographic communities that collect the rent and use that for public revenue.
So on the opposite side of the political spectrum, the libertarian political spectrum, there are anarcho-communists, libertarian socialists, syndicalists. What do you think is the key flaw of those ideologies?
Yeah. Well, if people want to form a commune or a communist society voluntarily, there's no problem. No libertarian has a problem with that. This is what people voluntarily want to do. But if the anarcho-communists believe that private property is inherently bad, then they would use force to prevent people from, say, owning a business and hiring people, then I don't see that as being truly anarchistic. So you could have a variety of communities under anarchism or, contractual societies, and people would just join whatever they have a preference for. Just like you'd have different religions having different churches or different cultures having their own clubs.
So actually, the first person to call himself an anarchist was Proudhon, and he was a mutualist, which again seems to be somewhere in between anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism.
Yeah.
So could you maybe explain what are the similarities and what are the differences between mutualism and geolibertarianism?
Well, Proudhon, when he said that property is theft, he meant property in land and its rent. He didn't mean like private property, like, goods that you own. Mutualism is fine as long as it's voluntary. But Proudhon was a kind of a proto-Georgist. He questioned the premise that you claim land simply by being the first person to step foot on it or to occupy it or so on. So he rejected that. So that's where he agrees with the Georgists that there's the issue of land. All libertarians would agree with self-ownership and that you should own your labor and your wages and the products of labor. The sticking point is land, which many libertarians believe in the homesteading. The first person who claims it is theirs. The trouble is 95% of the earth has been conquered and reconquered, so you can't really trace the ownership back to the original people who are probably gone. So they have a real problem justifying land ownership, which the Georgists solve by saying that whatever titles people have, the rights of possession, they can keep that as long as the rent is used for public revenue or revenue sharing.
Well, a critique that I understand coming from the anarcho-capitalists of mutualism is that if you aren't using land, then someone else can acquire it. And, that kind of gets satirized. I saw a cartoon recently where essentially there was an anarcho-capitalist standing next to a mutualist. And the anarcho-capitalist says, "Can you watch my bag for a minute?" And the mutualist says, "Okay." So the anarcho-capitalist walks away. And then the mutualist says, "Well, this is my suitcase now." So do you see that as being a justified critique of mutualism? Is that something that is blown out of proportion? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, geolibertarians would disagree with that. Now, Rothbard claimed that once a piece of land is homesteaded, then it belongs to the homesteader forever and his heirs. So once it's yours by whatever occupation and use is justified. I've never seen a good explanation of it. But anyway, given that you justly occupy and use land and now you have title to it, according to Rothbard, you can then walk away from it or rent it to somebody else, or somebody can inherit that and the title passes on. So I think most anarcho-capitalists today, as followers of Rothbard, would not agree that occupation and use justifies land. They would say that once it's claimed, the title is set forever.
So you had mentioned a couple of times having a tax. Now that brings to mind the famous libertarian or anarcho-capitalist phrase, "taxation is theft." Do you agree with that, or do you think that statement is flawed?
Well, geolibertarians distinguish between taxes in form and taxes in substance. So taxes in form is any payment to the government. Taxes in substance is an arbitrary payment not connected to any kind of benefit. So a tax on wages, a tax on goods, a tax on the profits of enterprise would be taxes in substance, and that indeed is theft. But a tax in form can be something like a pollution tax. So a polluter creates damage, and therefore the government levies him. Now, whether you want to call it a tax or a fine or a fee, there's some kind of charge to compensate for the damage caused. Now, if that takes the form of a tax, it's not a tax in substance, but it's compensation for damages. So same thing with a land value tax. it's a tax in form but not in substance. It's not arbitrary because if you're receiving benefits from the government and benefits from nature, you are basically paying for those benefits. So that's why I half agree that taxation in substance is theft, but not all taxation in forms is necessarily theft.